Hi everybody, this is Shiro from Guided Soul-ution, and on this episode of From the Heart, I wanted to talk about this thing about imagination. So the thing about imagination is that it's basically semantics to visualization. And when I was in music school, there was a class called image training. And what that class was teaching was that when you play your guitar and you're practicing a phrase or whatever, and you make a mistake, that they instruct you to stop playing or put the instrument down at that moment. Close your eyes and imagine yourself playing that phrase correctly over and over until you begin to fluently feel yourself playing that phrase without making mistakes. And the reason why is because when you're physically playing and you make a mistake and you try to play correctly again, the body will remember the mistake because of the imprint of the physical action of that mistake. And so the likelihood of making or repeating that mistake again is high. And for some reason, back then, it just made sense. But I didn't know anything about any of this that I know today. And, you know, when you look up manifestation these days, there are, many manifestation coaches and gurus that are teaching you. And the basic principle of manifestation, even though I did an episode in depth about that, so please do check that out for more details. But the basic principle of manifestation, they say, is what you see with your mind's eye and what you feel with your heart. And that two element coming together is the thing that is likely to manifest into your reality, which in and of itself makes sense. But when we talk about imagination, we don't necessarily always immediately associate to that level of impact or tangibility. In other words, imagination is, by semantics, kind of immediately moves into more of the lighter, frivolous, or perhaps even just made up element. But the one thing that we always say is that when we talk about, and this we get a lot, right? I get a lot of that in the session where people ask, like, well, what am I meant to do? I don't know what to do next. I quit my job and I don't know what I want to do next, and things like that. And the one piece of advice I always give them is that, first and foremost, what can you see yourself doing? What can you imagine yourself doing? Because the principle of imagination, of visualizing yourself doing something, is that you cannot imagine yourself doing something you are not capable of doing. And this is something that I observed for myself, though I've had some validations from external sources. This is definitely something that isn't necessarily studied or researched, so please do take this and as my observation and my conviction of it, but this is something that you will each individually have to validate for yourselves. But from what I know and see and observed is that when we imagine an outcome, what comes naturally, of course, now you can force a picture together, I'm sure, but let's just keep this within the definition of when we imagine something, the image that comes naturally to us, or without force. When we imagine an outcome and we can see ourselves doing something, it is because that outcome has been done already. In other words, all possible futures and outcomes with every available choice has been done. This is the notion of parallel realities and dimensions, perhaps, but without getting into the technical aspect of it, just kind of understand that we are now, not only from the esoteric point of view, understanding that all we have is the present now, but also even now scientifically, quantum physics have defined that there is no such thing as linear past or future. And I might have touched on this in my past video, but let me just reiterate. What that means is that all of our past versions of self, and that includes what we call past lives, and all of our future outcomes all exist at the same time, which is sort of a conundrum because time in and of itself doesn't belong in that sentence, really. It all exists in the present now. Like what I often use the analogy of Netflix homepage or Amazon Prime or whatever, where you open the homepage and you see all different types of contents existing at the same time, with various contents of worth 2 hours or whatever duration of that content is, and the moment we click on it, we access and experience its content. And our life experience, in which we have this illusion of time, space, and the experience of process, that we access different outcomes. But in essence, we are shifting from one moment of the now to another. And we look at it like a film, and we run it fast enough that we experience this thing that we call process or motion, or a sense of going from point A to B. And in that previous episode, not previous, but I've done a thing on manifestation in the previous episode, where I was defining manifestation as not so much that we manifest the thing that we want into our reality, but that we become the version of ourselves that has what we wanted to manifest in existing in that reality. That we become the manifestation, essentially. And so visualization process is absolutely important. To have a vision in and of itself is absolutely important. It has been said, I believe this was the Bible, but again, regardless of where it came from, that people perish because of lack of vision. Vision is the thing that gives us a sense of trajectory, a point. And because whatever vision we're holding, though our conscious mind may think that it's the goal, it's the thing that we want, whether it's the money or the relationship or the success or status or whatever it is that we think we want to manifest. We must remember that when we go back to the principle of what we see with our mind's eye and what we feel in our heart is the thing that manifests. So if we have a vision, the key question we have to ask ourselves is, are you feeling that vision? Is that representative of you and your joy? Which is the validation, right? The spark of joy that you feel about the goal or manifestation is the thing that says that represents your authenticity, your most authentic self, which the joy is the validating factor of. It is very important for us to understand that, because then we understand how to set our vision as well. But I kind of wanted to bring us back to the original thing. The thing about imagination is that when we imagine things, we are downloading what has already occurred. Even if it's not the exact accurate depiction, because if you think about how many times has science fiction writers of the old have imagined different things of the future that are now existing in a normal fashion in our society today. Phones that have TV monitors that we can talk face to face with, and things like that. What did Walt Disney and people like Steve Jobs really focus on? What drove them to create products and theme parks and characters that we are now enjoying today? It was imagination first. It was the idea first, and the idea is the component of imagination. So when science fiction writers write about the future, when we imagine different creatures and different vehicles and UFOs or whatever it is, even if they have never seen something existent from a book or photo, what they called imagination was a download of a world or dimension or a history or occurrence, like Star Wars, for example, that has occurred or exists in another portion of the now dimension. So when John Lennon wrote the song Imagine all the people living life in peace. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. I truly believe that John Lennon wasn't simply using that word as a sense of romance to just say, hey, imagine how it would be, how great it would be, but that he truly saw and understood and believed in the power of imagination. And so whether we call it visualization or imagination, the reason why it's a little different is because visualization has a much more proactive involvement of ourselves inside that imagination or imagined reality, because it's more active. But in the essence of it, It's the same thing. When we even think about healing, how we imagine a healed state, which is actually our original state, that we imagine something to be aligned is definitely a component, a vital component to healing, even at times a miraculous, what we call miraculous healing. So, even when you're considering to move somewhere, it's, you look at the paper and you go, okay, the rent is good, square footage, oh, I love the storage space, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But then one thing we want to ask ourselves is, do I see myself living here? Oh, I can see myself drinking coffee on this balcony. Then at least we know when we see it that it is one outcome that has occurred. It doesn't necessarily make it the best one or the highest outcome, because there are so many different potential outcomes. And this is why how we feel about that outcome when we see it, when we imagine it, is so important. Because even when we imagine a different version of our success, how we feel about each one is going to help us hone in on what your current self is truly resonating with. What represents at that moment of yourself, what represents the highest possible outcome. And this outcome may evolve and shift and change as time goes. So you don't need to attach and say, well, I saw that and felt that, therefore that has to be it. No, as you begin to use that as your guiding marker, you might begin to develop and evolve to a point where you go, you know what, I'm seeing a better outcome for myself from here, and begin to now develop a different vision altogether. But it took the initial spark of joy in that imagination to set you in motion. There's been tons of research, apparently. I just heard some where they have actually experimented on Olympic athletes, I guess, where one team would train their regular routine of training physically, and the other team would do their training only through imagination or visualization. And what they realized, or what they saw on the data, was that sometimes the visualization team would actually end up with a more improved performance than those that have rigorously physically trained. And I'm not taking away the benefit of the actual physical training, but I would imagine if that was the case, perhaps it was because the physically training team may have had a lot of maybe injuries or added stress or frustration that they couldn't improve upon their previous record or whatever, and maybe that has contributed, in which the visualization process removes those potential hurdles that hinders or delays the process. But even if we were to physically train, for example, because I remember early in my musical career, whenever I had a concert or gig, the night before I would be so anxious because I was afraid of making mistakes. And when I say I went to that class, I mean, I didn't really study a lot in my music school. I hated my music theory class, sight reading class. I had definitely certain favorite classes to go to. And I really ditched classes altogether because at that time I was so busy with my band. But the couple classes that I attended in my image training class, I remember vividly how important that was. And I remember just taking that little gist and going, oh, I applied it. Though that whole class was about a whole, I don't know, a semester worth or whatever, I only attended 2 classes. But I remember so clearly that moment when that teacher said, all right, when you make that mistake, put down your instrument and imagine yourself playing it right. And when you do, your body, because your brain doesn't know the difference between actually playing it and imagining playing it. The brain can have the same experience. And the thing is, our body only responds to the signal that our brain is transmitting. So the more that our brain has a clear image of the correct way of playing, we can play better. And I did. I would play the concert in my head and imagine certain difficult solos being played right. And I didn't make mistakes anymore. And when I don't do that, I tend to make more mistakes. But this episode is about this thing about imagination, that it deserves more awareness and attention. It doesn't have to be this big visualization session with yourself. That even when you imagine something, an outcome, wouldn't it be great if this happened? And you feel that excitement? Give that moment of enough validity to say, you know what? This is saying something about that. This is saying something about my potential trajectory moving forward. Because even when I give readings and they ask about an outcome, I have to specifically request for the best and highest possible outcome. And then I can also access an outcome where they've made different choices. Because they'll be coming to me with a potential job opportunity that pays really well. And I can access that outcome. But it would be essentially the same as imagination. It's not some special psychic skill. And as you begin to train your ability to imagine things, in essence, you are honing your sixth sense, your clairvoyance, the visual aspect of the clairs. And then perhaps even clairsentience, where you feel the outcome. And so when you are thinking about your steps forward and you don't really know what you want to do, start by imagining yourself doing something and see if you can see yourself doing it. And if you can, list them out. Well, I can see myself doing this. I can see myself doing that. And out of all the things you can see yourself doing, now ask yourself, how do I feel about each one? And as you begin to reconnect with those activities or outcomes or goals or accomplishments that you can see yourself doing. Mark the ones that sparks the greatest joy or excitement. Then, oh, this one's, I feel like joy. I feel excited and happy, and this joy comes over me, right? Excitement. I feel motivated to do this. I feel interest in doing this. I feel curious about doing this. All of these things are your inner navigational system, giving various validations to the various imaginations of yours. And they're all valid, you see. Because if you feel interest in something, absolutely that's your inner navigational system saying, yeah, there's something there. You want to follow it? It's worth it. In the same way, when you're feeling stress, anxiety, concern, or fear, that it is a alarm, your inner navigational system, alerting you to some sense of a misalignment. It's calling you to regroup. It's calling you to regain your self-center. But the thing about imagination is that we must begin to recognize that it is a download. It seems so easy that we just brush it off. Well, that was just something I imagined. But you cannot imagine something that is impossible. And so, what would happen if we all begin to embrace and give more value and validity and conscious awareness to our imagination, in which sometimes we just simply call it visualization, which is more recognized. But I'll tell you, imagine something cannot be a phrase that is easily dismissed as something just frivolous. I may be biased because I love John Lennon so much, but that song, Imagine, if we revisit that song with that understanding, and perhaps that John Lennon truly knew, because he's done some plant medicine journeys, he's done some soul searching. And no matter what people say about John Lennon, the songs he's written were downloads, inspirations that came from the infinite intelligence of this quantum field, as we all do in terms of creative inspirations. Because if this was a music creative tutorial video, I would have said the same thing. If you even feel some sense of inspiration to write a song about some topic, start on it, write about it. I've had many songs that I never came to fruition that are on my journal of song ideas. Yes, there are certain songs that will never become a song. But even if it's just a phrase that I just simply read back and go, oh man, that's pretty profound. Or sometimes I would go, oh my God, this phrase and this body of lyrics actually merges to become one bigger song. But the key is, how much validity am I giving to these seemingly off-the-cuff ideas, sudden inspirations, and imaginations. So I just wanted to really put this out there for anyone that may resonate about this, and especially if you are at a crossroad of making decisions. that to ask yourself, enough of what I think about this decision, how do I feel, and do I see myself doing it? Can I imagine myself doing this and thriving in it? Give your imagination that due validity and use it for your navigation, in which the sparks of joy that you may feel. And I can't say this enough about joy. You know, happiness is a choice. You can always choose to be happy. Well, glass half empty, but it's half full too. So I can just choose to be happy with that. Happiness is a choice. But joy is a phenomena. Joy is a phenomena that only occurs when you are truly in sync with your divine authenticity, your divine blueprint, the thing that you originally designed yourself to be at your best. And the joy that you feel, the spark of joy that you feel when you see yourself doing it, when you imagine an outcome, is the thing that validates further into how much it is part of, how much it's meant to be a part of your path, your trajectory, your goal, your vision. I hope this added some great value to you. I hope you resonated with it. Of course, always take these things that you take in from anywhere in your life and ask yourself if you resonate, if you own this information for yourself, until it becomes a part of you. That's what truth is. With that said, if you would like a personal counsel or reading, please feel free to reach out to me. All of my information are in the description box. I always appreciate you subscribing, liking the video. I know it's part of the algorithm that helps the video to circulate even more. Thank you for spending time with me here. As always, from the heart. Thank you.